So, a lot of us are watching Hetalia. Maybe it's just because we're in a recession again. Maybe it's because politics have been super good and normal, so poking fun seems appropriate. Maybe it's just nostalgia. At this point, I barely care, but that doesn't mean it wasn't a bit of a surprise to see Hetalia TikTok content in Year of Our Lord 2025. So while that next Voltron video is still cooking, I figured I'd make a little video about it. Something research light in which I could just yap about my own thoughts and feelings. Then my hand slipped 8,000 times when I wrote a bloated mess about cringe culture, media literacy, problematic media, and more. What? Oh, you're thinking that I have, in the time since, done the same thing and pared down that mess of an essay into a more concise review? Well, newsflash, I still don't do straightforward reviews and never will, so sit down and buckle up. We're talking about Hetalia today. Probably. So, nostalgia is, weird, right? I don't know about you, but when the depression demons hit me, I either tend to reach for media that reflects those depression demons right back at me, or I reach for something comfortable, Something that reminds me of a time when I didn't have to think about the state of the world or hold any political opinions aside from the ones my parents told me to. I'm nostalgic for Hetalia, certainly, but until really recently, it couldn't be counted amongst shows and movies that I turned on to experience the warm fuzzies. That was for two reasons. First of all, I just assumed it didn't hold up. Simple as that. Why watch Hetalia when I can instead turn on Full Metal Alchemist, a much better show that I first saw at around the same age. Secondly, and more importantly though, unlike Full Metal Alchemist, I remember actually being involved in Hetalia's fandom as a tween. And already that's a yikes for me, brother. It was 2011. I was no older than 12 and was at the time having a middle school experience that was probably not the worst, but also really not the best. See, I was a baby queer and half black to boot, attending a Christian school in an already way too conservative pocket of California. I was also kind of a weird kid.
In case you haven't noticed, I'm weird. I'm a weirdo.
I mean, I'm still kind of weird, but you get the point. But I remember Hetalia being one of the first things that me and the other weird kids could really bond over. In hushed corners of the school grounds and between stolen moments in gym class, we would talk about our favorite characters, our favorite ships. A group of nerdy kids with probably undiagnosed autism that didn't really know how to speak, even to each other, finally had something. Now, Christian school talked too loudly about these gay ships and you're likely to get sent to the principal's office, but that kind of enhanced the experience, didn't it? At least in our minds. We were prep school kids, too shy to do actually rebellious shit. You know that one Hatsune Miku song that kind of kicks ass about her being Fujoshi with undertones of religious trauma? That was us. That song is about us. And I don't know if you caught that blink and you'll miss it coming out line, but that allegation about most Fujoshi just being queer women or trans men sorting stuff out, yeah, it definitely applies here. Hetalia can be counted as one step in the long process that led me to incorrectly coming out as bisexual as a 15-year-old and finally asexual as a 20-something. Jury's still out about where this gender thing's going. Trust me, if I knew, I'd tell you. So, now you have installment 1 of my backstory, but what does that all amount to? Is there any experience more humiliating than being a tween in fandom and living to remember the tale? Probably, but allow me this hyperbole and let me remind you, we were a bunch of 12-year-olds that identified with the word Fujoshi that barely even had the social graces to talk to each other. I don't even think we knew how to talk in turn. At that stage of development, we were inflicting ourselves upon local anime conventions, live journal forums, and fanfiction.net comment sections. I can, off the top of my head, recall at least 3 things I did at that age that make me want to smack young me upside the head. I don't even have to try hard. These moments usually just appear to me in a burst of inspiration at 2 in the morning. It was, in a word, cringe. In 2 words, deeply cringe. But as a part of my adult mental health journey, I've been going out of my way to try and replace that smacking urge with something more akin to forgiveness, maybe even a bit of fondness. I find myself at times even getting a bit defensive of the little gal who was doing her best and finding her little ounce of happiness in a situation that I've honestly probably undersold just how traumatic it was in a lot of ways. It maybe didn't help that about halfway through making my Go Line video, I found myself back at that hometown for maybe the worst reason that one can find themselves back in their shitty hometown. I had to plan a funeral, and for some reason, between all the emails, all the mountains of cash that had to be raised and spent, all the calls and visits and wrangling of family members, I found myself taking an hour or so at the end of each day to write, of all things, a Hetalia fanfiction. I won't discuss it. The fanfiction, not the funeral, but you know what? We don't know each other well enough for me to discuss the funeral yet. Anyway, at this point, I'm not even sure I'm going to publish it. I'm not even sure why Hetalia specifically came to mind, but I did decide to finally rewatch it upon getting back home. Weird thing is, I think I enjoyed myself. About 4 pages into the script, it has occurred to me that some people watching this may not even know what Hetalia is. I'm 25, basically a dinosaur by internet standards, and this show came out when I was young. About as young as anyone can be in a fandom space. There's a good chance that some watching may have zero clue what I've been on about, and may have just taken this as a weird self-therapy session. First of all, how dare you call me out like that? Hetalia, aka Hetalia Access Powers. Yeah, if you're wholly unfamiliar, that title may have been a bit of a flashbang. Stay with me! Sometimes shortened to APH, is an anime based on a webcomic turned manga of the same name created by one Hidekazu Himaruya. The title, Hetalia, is a Japanese pun, combining the word useless, hetare, with the Japanese pronunciation of Italy, Italia. This series answers the age-old question of what if countries were people? And what if those people kissed? That's genuinely it. There's no deep lore, no overarching plot. It's mostly just back-to-back gags. It is adapted from a gag manga after all. Despite Italy being the title character, he's not exactly the main character, with the show having a pretty massive ensemble cast by the end. Each character is a caricature of the people of that nation, with a sort of everyone's a little bit racist approach to equal opportunity stereotyping.
I say we hit Italy first because they can't drive and are usually drunk.
Don't worry, it's largely harmless and mostly aimed at Western European countries. England can't cook, Germany is uptight, America eats too many hamburgers, that kind of stuff. There are maybe 1 or 2 running jokes that go too far, in my opinion, and they will be addressed later. But as far as the anime is concerned, you have to be trying pretty hard to be offended by that aspect of it. Each episode is less than 5 minutes long, and if you skip the theme song each time, you could probably watch the whole thing in the time it takes you to watch Avengers Endgame. Despite mostly taking place during World War II, it has a breezy tone, episodes often being made up of multiple smaller segments that make it feel more like scrolling through TikTok than watching an anime. Hey, maybe that's why it's doing numbers on TikTok. Huh. It's funny, it's flirty, the boys are pretty, and pay close attention and you might even learn a thing or two. It's most people's opinion, and mine, that this thing shouldn't be seen as anything approaching educational, but it does throw in historical facts now and again through on-screen text. That isn't translated anymore in most modern copies, thanks Crunchyroll. And can broad strokes explain the geopolitical reality of whatever time period it happens to be focusing on. It should all be taken with a dash of salt and with the knowledge that Himaruya was just some 21-year-old with a mild interest in history making a silly webcomic about the Davas of Italy and Germany almost kissing, but... Wait, where is it going with this? It's worth watching. Probably. I'm not your mom. Crack open a drink and watch it in a Discord call with your least easily offended friends. Or your most easily offended friends. That'd be an interesting call. Luck, who I stream with like once a week playing Kingdom Hearts these days, helps me edit these scripts, and he told me to add more calls to action. So this is the part where I ask you to put a time-stamped comment telling me what you thought of the show, however much you got through anyway. I tend to have success when showing Hetalia to new people, but my friends tend to be a bunch of freaks and weirdos, and I am at least a bit interested in what a non-freak might think of this thing, and not in a, I sure hope these libs get triggered kind of way. I view being liberal as a competition, and we're winning. It's Rather, because in recent years I've become a bit fascinated with the ways in which we interact with media nowadays, especially media that we don't like. Now, going off script here, this is actually something that happened during the recording of the script, but the Lilo and Stitch movie came out, and I've noticed a lot of people throwing very pointed criticisms at the plot while also openly admitting that they haven't actually seen the movie. And, don't go see the movie. It doesn't deserve your money. Disney does not deserve your money. But why are you criticizing the plot of a film you haven't seen? It just seems like common sense to me. I don't know. A lot of the current climate is frustrating. I don't mean to be old man yelling at cloud, but these kids do be getting on my nerves sometimes. Sometimes it feels like any idiot with an iPhone and an hour to spare can post a review on something. Not that I don't fit that description. I think a lot of people form opinions about what they consume without thinking much further beyond their first gut reactions and feelings. And to be clear, that's what I'm asking of you here. I don't really want a 5-page, well-thought-out review. I am not reading that shit. Think of this as an opportunity to capture your gut reactions and feelings, to think back on your feelings when having first watched the series. I want you to then revisit that comment when we're through and do the due diligence of meditating on it, especially if you didn't like it, and especially if you found it problematic or cringe or whatever. Because, as you've probably figured out by now, this isn't a video about Hetalia, this is a video about thinking, and thinking about Hetalia, and thinking about
All right.
The journey that brought me here actually started with Has Been Hotel, a show that I artistically fuck with in a lot of ways, even as I have mixed feelings about its execution. I had criticisms of the show, but largely found those criticisms going unvoiced in online spaces in favor of kind of shallow arguments that typically come in two flavors. They either didn't vibe with the aesthetics, found the art grating, thought the swearing was excessive, etc., or they had moralistic arguments, feeling it was corrupting the youth, thought the swearing was excessive, etc. Why do so many people seem to have a problem with swearing? Whatever. That essay will come one day. Either when season 2 comes out or when I manage to crack 1,000 subs, whichever comes first. The version of that video that lives in my mind palace will have me expanding on the arguments I'm attempting to make here. At one point during development, though, I found myself trying to imagine the type of person that may fall into one or both of those earlier mentioned camps. Imagine that a person like that probably wouldn't like Hetalia for at least related reasons. However, believe it or not, it's not very intellectually satisfying to dunk on an invented straw man. I could imagine a version of this essay, which words like puritanical thinking, do not interact lists, media literacy, and other such buzzwords took center stage, but let's be real, smarter people than me have covered these topics, and recovering them in a kind of shallow way was just less interesting to me than actually digging deep. I had to do more than just imagine a person that didn't vibe with Hetalia. I wanted to pull a Tim Rogers and imagine a version of myself that didn't vibe with Hetalia. Because I did vibe with it, but sometimes felt a bit off, for lack of a better term, while doing so. Maybe guilty is the right word. There was this point, after I had gotten through all of the episodes that I had seen as a kid, where I kind of sat with myself and thought, hey, is Hetalia problematic? And more importantly, does that mean anything? Like, am I allowed to enjoy Hetalia? The TLDR answers are yes, kind of, and yes, but arriving to those answers wasn't exactly quick and painless. Everyone's asking, what is Hetalia? No one's asking, how is Hetalia? That's it, that's the joke. I've recommended Hetalia to you already. It was a formative show for me. I think it's cute and inventive. It's funny, snappy. The English dub has no shortage of quotable moments with dialogue that would feel at home in an abridged series.
Can you even use it?
The boys are real cute, if that's something you care about. And I know I do. But it's not really a B-shonen show, at least not in a modern sense, though an argument could be made that it helped pave the way for others. The cast is so large that you will inevitably find one that you like, and it's kind of Schrodinger's yaoi? Like, there are a lot of pairings that you can speculate on. A lot of dynamics that seem to feed into the idea that you're meant to ship them and make R18 doujinshi to sell at Comic-Con to show your allegiance. Wait, the kids may not know what that is, right? Slash fanfiction for AO3? That's better. That being said, there are no canon pairings. It's not overtly queer, but it is super fucking gay if you're paying any amount of attention. If you are one of those that views shipping as an Olympic sport, first off, I'm glad you found me. We are going to be very good friends. Secondly, this show is probably for you. I'm prefacing with all that because I'm about to get a little mean about this show. I'm about to throw some criticisms that I maybe only kind of agree with, even as I find them worth interrogating. I wanted to set the stage with the statement that I like this show in a really uncomplicated kind of way. I wanted to say thank you to all that saw my Go Line video. It's like dangerously close to 1,000 views, and I'm really happy about that. If you've come back for this one as a new subscriber, I actually love you. If you aren't subscribed, consider it. You could also consider my Ko-fi or Patreon. Subscribe to the Patreon and you'll even get a credit in this segment right here in future videos. Creators like me rely on those to keep creating, as YouTube is a fickle mistress. I also make stupid jokes on Twitch every week and even do these really cool book club videos every month with luck. We're doing the Percy Jackson series right now. Voltron Part 2 is coming still, don't worry. Share Part 1 or watch it if you haven't. And yes, I was serious about doing a has-been video if I get to 1K subs. I have a few ideas for how I might round out this problematic media trilogy, so stay tuned. I'm going to also slip in real quick that I'm not really going to be digging in too hard into anything about the fandom. If you want a good fandom deep dive, I suggest Alarin Talks' video on the subject. She's critical without unfairly maligning the show or anyone involved in the community, and while I don't agree with literally everything she has to say, it is a very good video. I just think covering the fandom here would kind of muddy the waters. The fandom is on the older side now. It's quieted down. All those annoying 12-year-olds are my age now and have either severely calmed down or moved on. I entertain the possibility that back in the day you may have heard some fandom horror story that kept you from watching the show initially. Whether we like it or not, and whether it is true or not, a fandom often feels like a reflection of its precious fave. If you believe a fandom to be mostly full of annoying lowest common denominator idiots, then you will assume the show to be lowest common denominator slop. If you believe a show's fans happen to align with a certain political party thanks to a cosplay scandal from the time that may have changed the policies of many cons across the country, then you may assume that either the show is pro that party at worst, or that there is something within it that is permissive of the party at best. Neither of those points hold up, of course, but they are understandable as gut reactions. Any fandom, once it gets large enough, will gain a certain level of bad actors. It's simple math. See, if we assume like 1% of people are kind of shitty and get a room of 100,000 people, then that's 1,000 really shitty people that are probably being the loudest, most annoying in the room. Those 1% should not be considered representative of everyone, however, and would probably be acting that way regardless of why they were here or even regardless of them being here at all. Hetalia was one of those fandoms that was large enough. It was huge. I anecdotally remember some voice actors at a con talking about how happy they were that Hetalia DVD sales had exceeded Avatars, the blue people one, on Amazon for a time. And you could hardly throw a bucket without hitting an America cosplayer or 12 at said con. It shouldn't be a surprise then that since the fandom has shrunk and grown older, those problems have not been a problem. It's almost as if the show was never really like that, and that there's nothing about it that's in conflict with perfectly normal progressive values. Well, I mean, I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, he's kind of a sadist, actually. He's a dead super kind of sadist with a lot of hardcore books and DVDs. You can't guess what I've seen living with him.
Huh, weird. My not a Nazi apologist t-shirt sure seems to be raising a lot of questions already answered by my shirt. I feel like I should address them, because to my memory, the nationalist allegations went a bit further than one or two cosplayers acting a fool. Before Hajime Isayama became something of a poster child for Japanese nationalist mangaka, Hidekazu Moriya was. According to some people, anyway. Himaruya is a very private person. We don't even have a photo of him. The photo that appears when you Google his name is actually composer Sachiro Kosaki. I couldn't tell you a single political belief that Himaruya holds, good or bad. Unlike Isayama, who mostly got this reputation through reporting on his social media presence, Himaruya really seems to be judged as this through his work alone. Considering the bombastic military propaganda of Attack on Titan, I think it's easy to look at the two shows, say they have nothing in common with each other, and just assume that the people who made that argument are reaching. And they are, but it is worth explaining where they're coming from. So, let's talk about the Axis powers. Japan, Germany, and Italy. When people say that Himaruya is a nationalist or has nationalist tendencies, the depiction of Japan is usually what they're criticizing. Again, a lot of jokes in Hetalia rely on stereotype. The characters and characterization tend to be really loud and in your face, but Japan seems to be an exception to both of these rules. He's subdued, quiet, the voice of reason. Like, America's character traits include him being loud, annoying, and stupid. Compare him to the hard-working and sensible Japan. You might assume the mangaka is trying to say something here. So, and I'm not the first person to say this, I'm pretty sure TV Tropes makes this argument too at one point. A lot of this stems from a misunderstanding. It's not that Japan is a Mary Sue, but rather that his character jokes are just going over your head. It's not even me saying, you have to have a pretty high IQ to enjoy Hetalia. That's me pointing out that while the other countries' jokes tend to rely on stereotypes, Japan's is more based on cultural in-jokes that maybe aren't the most accessible to the average English speaker. For example, Japan doesn't say no. An outsider may cry Mary Sue and say he's agreeable, and that's not a character flaw. Someone like me, who has been to Japan a few times, is able to chuckle because, yeah, Japanese people often avoid saying no to the point that it makes communication actively harder. Japanese teachers will coach their English-speaking students to learn how to understand when a Japanese person means no. And there are multiple stories out there from Japanese people and foreigners alike about how much of a pain that tendency can be in the business world. It's not that Japan is perfect, it's rather that he's a version of his culture that's written by an insider, and may I remind you, with other insiders in mind. Some anime studios nowadays do consider the foreign market, but a 21-year-old webcomic artist from 2006 absolutely would not have. There's an argument to be made that his youth created a kind of bias, that he probably should have been a bit more equal opportunity and allowed his own home country to be the butt of the joke now and again. The American English dub team certainly took a lot of pot shots in America during the localization process.
I guess being bloodthirsty kinda gets distracting. And by that I mean bringing democracy to the rest of the world.
And yeah, I think I basically agree with that. I just find it a bit ridiculous that some take that to mean Himaruya is denying Japanese war crimes.
Everyone shut up!
Germany!
Is making Germany, like circa 1940s Germany at Vichy with a crush on Italy, problematic? Wait, I'll be honest, I don't have an answer for you with this one. It's irreverent, sure, like in the same way that one movie about Hitler coming back to life in modern day and being mistaken for an absurdist comedian is irreverent, but maybe with a little less politically aware comedy. I don't know. It's just one of those things in which you're either able to get over it, or you have a reaction so visceral you just can't. I can't control your reaction. I don't blame you for your reaction. I just want you to not take the wrong lesson from it, I think. The lesson that I remember a lot of people taking back in the day, though the same mistake seems to be getting repeated nowadays. Depiction is not endorsement is a phrase that I see get thrown around a lot. Usually when it comes to fanfiction or the romance novel space. I don't want to rehash that whole argument because I'm not a masochist, but it does minorly apply here. Not that anyone is saying Himaruya, thinks Germany did nothing wrong or something. It's rather that some worry this soft depiction of Germany might prime some of Hetalia's younger viewers for such beliefs. That as a result, there is something inherently wrong with such a depiction existing at all, and that it is morally bad for such a thing to have been made in the first place. That pre-mentioned cosplay scandal certainly gives that idea some legs. And oh boy, if that isn't a big question that raises more questions about the morality of parody, about if Hetalia does even qualify as parody. And again, I'm not a masochist. What I am is someone that believes in the personal responsibility of viewers. Is Hetalia's Germany problematic? Probably, but is engaging with or promoting the work irresponsible? Only if you do so irresponsibly. Despite the strays that the fandom has caught in this essay, more of them are interested in history than you may think. I like to compare Hetalia to the history side of YouTube. Little bite-sized lessons to be taken with a grain of salt that can, at their best, teach you a fun fact or two while hopefully stimulating a greater interest in history. To paraphrase a really good YouTube history lecture on the French Revolution by the artist formerly known as Munchie Wears Tiny Hats, I actually can't recommend this one since he can get a little slur-happy. Again, I don't endorse every word of every creator I cite. Videos like that can act as a good appetizer, a jumping off point at which you can go forth and deepen your own historical knowledge. Now, you can sit there assuming that Hetalia viewers didn't do that since they're just dumb kids, or you can actually open up AO3 and be immediately proven wrong. Historical Hetalia may be one of my favorite things to come out of fandom since ever, basically. A good amount of Hetalia fanfiction is not unlike fic from any other fandom. You have fluff, smut, coffee shop AUs, etc. You also have what the fandom calls historical Hetalia. And that's the tag used on AO3. You're welcome. What it is exactly varies, but at its core, it's Hetalia fics with works cited pages. Fanfictions whose whole point is to take the historical setting deadly seriously. They tend to drop the comedic tone, oftentimes treating canon as allegory, assuming they don't disregard it entirely. Sometimes it's an alternate universe in which the nations are all regular people, and other times, and these are my favorites, they're interpreted as these ageless, immortal beings that have witnessed countless bloodshed, the rise and fall of nations. Instead of a gag manga, they're in a world where war is war, and the characters feel like people, multifaceted and complex, allowed to do evil and have evil done upon them. Basically, it's if Hetalia was a historical drama, and I love it. It's a phenomenon that really tosses aside the notion that the fans are uncritical of what they're looking at, or that Hetalia is in conflict with intellectualism and history. Pretending otherwise insults the intelligence of us former 12-year-olds that liked it, while giving unfair weight to bad actors that were chastised into submission over a decade ago now. The character of Germany is messy, but it's hardly the end of the world, especially when fans are not only willing to acknowledge it, but explore it in a way that enriches them.
Always tastes so good, it'd be heaven for a dog. Yeah, that's Germany.
As the title character, you might think Italy is the most important aspect of this discussion, and you'd be kind of right. Hetalia is a comedy, and Italy being a kind of innocent, lovable buffoon should tell you everything you need to know about where the tone is at here, and I think that's important to wrapping up these arguments. Any discussion about Hetalia and nationalism done in good faith has to acknowledge that it's a comedy, and you're really not supposed to be taking any of this seriously. Any major discussion about the politics of Hetalia can be pretty easily countered with an, "Not that serious, bro." Hetalia is like My Brother, and Me. It has a strict no bummers policy. Any historical event that could be a bummer is turned into a joke. Any that's so much of a bummer that it's impossible to joke about is omitted entirely, and it's very consistent about this. Were it not for one really shockingly inappropriate and edgy joke done by the English dub team that I will not be repeating anyway. I compared it to an abridged series earlier. That's not always a positive comparison. I haven't just been using clips of the English dub for the sake of clean footage. I'm also reviewing the English dub specifically here. If you're not aware, the English dub and the original Japanese version are not the same show.
Try relaxing like me every once in a while. Dude, I'm not sure I could ever love Moose and drag my ass as much as you do, okay?
もっとスローに生きたらどうだい? You sure? 違うよ。君が遅すぎるんだよ。
I recommend that English version, typically because it's much funnier, especially as an English speaker, but that can sometimes come at the cost of dealing with a lot of 2010's edge. There are throwaway jokes that hit differently nowadays. The characters creep on each other, as was fashionable to do in 2010's yaoi and yaoi-adjacent shows. France is basically a stereotype of a sexually aggressive bisexual man. If you grew up on Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged, or are cursed with the knowledge of what loveless is, then a lot of this probably won't even register, or at least not beyond a, sure was a different time kind of way. But I feel a little bad for any younger people going in blind. And I don't think just telling y'all to grow a tougher skin is productive or helpful. I'll instead just ask you very nicely to be patient with it. Give it its flowers where it deserves, even as we acknowledge how it could have been better, because, may I remind you, watching it was like the first time I realized that two boys could kiss. Like, that was a thing you could do? It's not like an unfortunate coincidence that transgressive, even problematic media tends to push progressive ideas. If you, as an artist, want to push the boundaries in one way, you're probably more amenable to pushing it in others than the average Joe Schmo, even if that pushing goes on the boundaries of acceptability. Think about how South Park, for example, was legitimately important to gay representation on American television, or the Rocky Horror Picture Show's importance to queer representation in film. I know that times have changed, but there is, in fact, a reason as to why people above a certain age get really mad at people below a certain age that are so gung-ho about getting rid of all problematic media. And I think, in light of a potentially looming Project 2025, this shit's more important than ever. You are not making the modern media landscape more hospitable. You are spitting on your queer foremothers. Oh, this section was about Italy at some point. Yeah. Good point, moving on. Remember how I started off this video talking about the reasons why someone might be getting back into Hetalia now of all times? Well, I kind of buried the lead because it's actually a bit more complicated than I had said back then. Nostalgia is one motivation for wanting to rewatch Hetalia, but that's not exactly special to Hetalia, right? If I was just looking for comfort and nostalgia, I probably should have picked something a bit easier to digest, like Moomin, but instead, I chose Hetalia, and I'm not the only one. I had alluded to it as a bit of a throwaway joke, but I think Hetalia's place as geopolitical parody is a big part of this. Not only are you brought back to a time when you didn't have to worry about complicated politics, but you are presented with something that intentionally simplifies it. And my one real problem with the show is that I'm not sure if that's something we need right now. For all of its problems, I really like Hetalia. It's a good time. I'll never turn down a little clip compilation when it shows up in my feed, but that guilt I was talking about way back then kicks in every now and again. And that conundrum is basically why. The modern political landscape is messy, but it has always and will always be my opinion that lying down and rotting, that trying to tune it out or wait it out, is the last thing anyone should be doing. You care about fascists? They're here. Go out and do something about it. But I also acknowledge that I reached for Hetalia at maybe the hardest time in my life so far, for reasons that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with not wanting another thing on my plate on top of everything else. I guess what I'm arguing with myself about is this. Is Hetalia comfort food, or is it mental opium? Is it here to be comforting, or did I just reach for it to numb the pain of my modern existence? And again, I don't know. What I do know is that comfort food can clog your arteries if you eat too much, and painkillers can be medically necessary if the situation is dire enough. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe my guilt is displaced. Maybe I'm just looking at it wrong. I don't know, but I like Hetalia. I like that it's simple and comforting. I've even liked arguing about it to myself for however many minutes long this video has been going. The name of the game here, as has been the name of the game since word 1, is responsible consumption. Looking below the surface and taking the initiative to learn and enrich your own artistic experience. Not being content with just being spoon-fed every answer from your media overlords, because that's how we get Netflix openly admitting that they dumb down their scripts for people who don't bother to look up from their phones when watching something. And don't you say you don't do it. I do it, we all do it, it sucks, but it's true. You want to stop that? You want to improve your own media literacy or whatever? Pay attention. Watch things worth paying attention to, and for God's sake, take your time. Reject series that are simply good or bad and embrace the things that change your life. I'm not sure if Hetalia will do that for you, but it sure did for me.